Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next video in this series of. It's really prep work for me. I'm teaching a summer camp on game dev for high schoolers, a week of 3 hours a day for 5 days to learn game dev, and kind of going over all the pieces of the plan to make sure I'm ready for that. And I decided to record it, uh, well, for my own benefit as I get the plan together for it and just put those on YouTube because other people might find it useful. So we've been working along, made the landscape for our character and put that in the game engine we're going to use. It's general game development, but we're using the Godot game engine. Uh, that's a easier learning curve than Unity or Unreal. So a little easier to get started there and learn the concepts, not necessarily Godot, the concepts of game development and Blender to make our models. So in the last couple of videos, we've been working on this character model a long way from the final draft, but it should have the approximate right proportions. If we grab the measuring tool over here, we can see it's about the normal height of a human and the normal width of a human. So mark that, then hit delete to get rid of that measurement. But the right proportions, so that way when we go to debug our game logic, we can kind of see the scale of how things are going to be, and then the fine details can be worked in later. But we probably want to see a couple animations, so I wanted to go ahead and do that. And just like you, for 3D modeling, what we do is we give it a skeleton, and then we position the skeleton, and the skin comes along with it. Same way you move. There's a fancier way we'll do later. It's at the end of the list of material for the summer camp, that if there's time. It's a thing called inverse kinematics. Sounds really fancy. And when we start doing it, we will see a bunch of inputs that all have super fancy names and makes it seem really complicated, but it's just the marionette style puppets where we have like 4 or 5 strings that control the whole puppet. Uh, so big fancy words, but conceptually it's fairly easy. It's a lot more like the way you move. Like when you walk, you probably haven't paid attention since you were an infant. But if you pay attention to when you're walking, all you really think about is where your ankle goes. You just position your ankle and the rest of your body comes along with it. So that's how those marionette puppets would work. They'd connect to like the ankles and the wrist, maybe one to the head. And then there's 5 strings that control the whole puppet. We can do that in 3D models as well, which use big fancy names, but it's very simple once you start doing it and start working with it, just like the puppets. It does take a little bit of practice, just like the puppets, but um, it's a fairly simple concept and it's more attuned to the way you move. But for us today, we're just going to do a basic animation. So the first thing we need in order to animate this is a skeleton to attach so that our skin will follow a skeleton when we position it. And to do that, we use what's called an armature. And there's an add-on in preferences called Rigify. Oh, we go over here and search for Rigify. I'm not going to use this one right now, but that's one you might want to plug in. Because then instead of a single bone in building up the skeleton, we have entire shapes, like we have a human shape. And you can see all those face bones in there. So once you add all the details with the vertices, edges, and faces, you have lots of bones to control those. We're just doing the simple concepts now. We'll probably see some of that later in the week because that gets a little more complicated. But if we go to the add menu and add an armature, we can add a single bone. And you want to add just one bone, and then we will make the entire skeleton by extending that one bone. So I move it up kind of where like the backbone would be, but it's hard to see here. So we want to be able to see that. So with the armature selected, you'll notice over here on these tools on the right, we got a couple new buttons. These green ones, one looks like a stick man, one looks like a bone. These control our bones. If you come to the stick man looking one and scroll down to viewport display, there's a checkbox here for in front. And that way we can always see that so that we know what's going on with it. So we'll start with this first bone and then turn that into an entire skeleton. And doing that is very similar to how we created that mesh in the previous videos. If we select the armature, come over here in the top left and switch to edit mode, we can do fine grained control on this. So first thing I'm going to do, this is going to be like the backbone. So I'll select that, maybe move it up a little, about where the back would seems like it's going to start. And I'm going to hit S and scale it down to the right size. Scale it and position it to where it seems like the backbone for the character would start. Right down a little, and I'll make a couple bones. And then S to scale and R to rotate it. So those three things: location, rotation, and transform. And since we're looking through our mesh, make sure you turn and look at lots of different angles to see it. Okay, that looks like a good start for the backbone, the lower back, or most of the back. So I'm going to click this top of the bone and push E to extrude again. And I'll bring another little bone out for the rest of the back. Straighten that up so it looks fairly straight. There we go. E, make one for the neck, which might be a little bit back in the neck. So I'm going to that connecting point, bring that forward. I'll give us one for the neck. Choose that top end and extrude that out and have a bone for our head. The early draft of the character, one bone will probably be enough. So like in the idle animation, his head, we can bob his head or something. And just give a bone for each section of the mesh that you want to control. So I'll come back here to the shoulder area, that little knob in between those two bones, and push E and extrude one out for the shoulder. Then E, maybe two out for the shoulder. Extrude one for the upper arm, one for the lower arm, and one for the hand. And then just put those into the position they need to be. So grab the little knob, move it to where it looks like it's about the center of the thing and the right level. And it can be, try not to do too much at once. Notice how I'm grabbing the arrows and only dealing with one dimension at a time. So I just dealt with the Y, and now I'll get the X position and maybe the Z position, but the Z and just deal with one dimension at a time, just a little bit at a time so you don't get overwhelmed. So bring that back in the Y, down so that the joint is kind of right where the wrist would be, and the X, and just do a little bit at a time. And then for the early draft, I'll just do one hand here, kind of rotate back and forth and move it in position. Take your time, make sure it's in the position you want it to be in to begin with, to avoid, that way you can avoid trouble later. But like all of this stuff, it's going to take some practice. We're just looking at the concepts now. I'll do one leg over here, extrude out something for like a hip, then extrude an upper leg, a lower leg, and then a bone that'll be the foot. And then just one at a time, move those into the position they need to be at. Whoops, wrong bone. So Control Z undoes it. Make sure you have the right thing selected. Maybe move that forward just a little so it's about the center of the body. Move that forward so that it's like the knees towards the front. Move that up about where the ankle needs to be, and forward, and just deal with one dimension at a time until you get it, look at it from different angles until you get it in what seems like the right position. That might be a little bit too far forward. And just give each section of skin a little bit of a bone to work with. So maybe move that down just a little bit further. Grab the end here and put that up here at the front of the foot. And you want to look at lots of different angles and take your time. Try to get it in the approximate position you want. And it's more of the same thing for the other side of the body. So I'm going to pause the video and do that because you don't need to watch me do the same thing twice. But just deal with one dimension at a time on each little knuckle of those bones until you get every single one in the what seems like the correct position for the skin that surrounds it. So slow, tedious, take your time, but try to get, you want to try to get everything in the in the position you want it in the first time to avoid trouble later. So I'm going to pause the video and do the other half, and then we'll do the animations. Okay, so that didn't take me too long, but I have had lots and lots of practice at this, decades of practice with and some formal training and in 3D modeling. So I've had lots and lots of practice at it, and you'll want to get that practice. But take your time, make sure the skeleton is in the right position, and once you have everything ready, then we're ready to make the skeleton a parent of the skin. So to do that, we come back to object mode, and the order matters here. So if we select the child and then the parent, so select the skin, hold shift and select the thing and push Control P. Notice that we get options about the armature to form, the object. If we select the other way, it's like the skeleton and then the skin, we get different options. And it looks like a shorter list. We want the longer list. So skin first, and then armature. And when you hit Control P, as in parent, set parent, if you got your skeleton in the good spot, you can go with automatic weights. And notice now we have to extend the armature to see the skin, which I should probably rename that skin and skeleton, so we can see what we're working with. And now we can just position our skeleton and the skin will come along with it. So with the skeleton selected, over here, you'll see there's a new one called pose mode. So if we go in here and grab one of our bones, so like maybe this one, and I like to bring my mouse a little ways away and push R to rotate. And see, when we rotate that bone, everything comes along with it. I'll click over here, and if you push Alt R, that puts everything back in the rest position. So select A to select all, then Alt R will put everything back in the rest position. And you just want to click some bones, and notice when we move that, the whole leg comes along with it. If we move that one, and that's how we will do the animations, by just moving our skeleton and the skin comes along with it. And we just need to save those. So push A, Alt R, and you want to do a quick check to make sure everything's in the right position. So with the skeleton, it's a lot like your bones. You don't want to do a whole lot more than just rotate them a little. So check your rotations and make sure the correct skin seems to be moving with the different parts of the skeleton. That looks good. A will select all, and Alt R resets it. So looks like our skin is assigned correctly to the skeleton. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and set up the animations. Looks like we're coming on 14 minutes. That's a good length for the video. Lots of little steps, but take your time and get the skeleton in the right position and make sure everything's assigned correctly. And if not, undo it and redo the assignment. And in a later video, in this set, we will see how we take fine-grained control over that. But for starting position, just get your skeleton set up nicely with the skin, and the automatic weights should be good enough for now. We'll do the fine details in a later video. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll do the animations for this character.